Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and today I have a ready opening that is ready to be played. Uh, but it has unfortunately already been played, and it was a game that I ended up winning to get myself over 2100 in Rapid on chess.com. So I have been over 2100 before. My highest peak is 2300, but that was on provisional. So technically that does not count in my opinion, of course. Getting lucky winning a few games against some 2400s and 2300s uh, may be impressive, but of course your real true ranking, of course, I believe really boils down to how much you can grind out as far as in the standard rating pool system. So without further ado, here we get started. I'm just going to, of course, go through the moves with a little bit of analysis. I just wanted to kind of express my gratitude, of course, for you guys still being with me as far as viewership goes. This is a ready opening, like I said, and it is a ready gambit. I will go over the moves briefly, or the analysis briefly, and go over the moves in more detail and call them out. So you can eventually, of course, if you are trying to do blindfolded chess and try to memorize and visualize moves, you can use this as your uh, own kind of training lesson as well. So we have knight f3, d5, c4, d takes c4, queen a5 check, a4 check. Now this move right here does fork the king and the pawn in order to win back the pawn. However, it allows white to develop with tempo in a way uh, while the queen is being put on an awkward square. So the next move is knight to c6, best move. Queen takes pawn. And then the best move here would have been e5. However, that was not played. Uh, Knight to f6 was played. After knight f6, we have g3. Then we have queen to d5. A little bit awkward, but I was trying to trade the queens to get down to an endgame because I wanted to basically go to an endgame, which I feel is a little bit more of my strength. When I get a little bit more tired, I feel like my endgame skills are a bit better than during the middle game. Queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and a3. This prevents, of course, the move knight to b4, which was going to be a little bit awkward for white to have to deal with. Next, we have e5, knight c3, and knight takes knight. So, knight takes knight, white is faced with the problem of which pawn to take with. Both moves probably are very adequate to play. But of course, he decides to go with d takes c3. The next move is bishop to d6, over defending the pawn. Bishop to g2. And then an awkward move, knight to a5. So my idea is basically to threaten to win the two bishops. F4 probably would have been better to be played, as well as any other numerous amounts of moves such as bishop to d7, um, preparing for a long castle, getting ready to defend b7 on the fianchettoed bishop. This move basically allows knight to d2, which would make it very awkward for white or for black to have to figure out how to unravel his pieces. It would be difficult because c6 could not be played because of the immediate b4. White is actually threatening b4, so that way he can potentially, of course, double up black's pawns for a little bit of a structural weakness. However, that would have been fine by me because I would have had the two bishops. So the next move we have is bishop to e3. And with bishop to e3, my plan actually, he fell into my plan, which was to put the knight onto c4 anyway, with knight to c4, forking the pawn and the bishop. So the bishop has to move back to c1, bishop to c1. Then we have an awkward move by me that gives up my very slight advantage, or 0.21, of course, to equality pretty much, with e4. This is an inaccuracy. Castles was best. It says, of course, that is 0.75 here for white. However, in other analysis, it's less, of course, like 0.2. So I would go ahead and, if you want to analyze this on your own, you can feel free, of course, to use the, I can provide PNGs or, PNGs, I think it is. PGNs. Uh, Later, of course, if you're interested, for these positions, and I can go ahead and hopefully, of course, you can analyze them on your own. Knight to g5, another inaccuracy that leads to my plan being fulfilled, with the move f5. Then we have castles, and slight inaccuracy by me, castles. b3, threatening the knight, and I should have played knight to a5 here, but I didn't. I played knight to e5. And we have bishop b2, h6, threatening the knight. Then knight to h3. And a little bit of a few inaccuracies here, or just good moves, I should say. As per what chess.com, I would consider them inaccuracies, because they are very slightly giving away the game. Knight to g4, e3, bishop e5, another inaccuracy, like I said. Rook a b1. Now here, bishop to e6 is probably less of a bad inaccuracy, or less of an inaccuracy, because it does develop the bishop, and it still maintains somewhat of a small advantage for black. c4, bishop takes bishop, rook takes bishop, rook fd8, which is an inaccuracy as well. Knight f4, bishop moves back to f7, rook b1, g5, finally getting the knight away. Knight to e2. Now here I should have played the move c5. That just would have been very productive, and I thought that I wasn't going to have enough time to be able to play c5, because any rook is going to move over to the file and take the file. But unfortunately, this kind of traps my rook a little bit, because the pawn, actually, let me go back, of course. Knight e2, rook d2, then knight d4, threatening to win my pawn, with bishop to g6 preventing the pawn from being taken. Rook b d1, and then rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and rook d8. So here it's a little bit unclear as far as what's going on with white's plan, but you'll get to see that black has a nice position compared to white, based upon the not only the evaluation, but the rest of the game that happens. Rook c1, which is the first little mistake, and c5. Knight to e8 to e8. I said c. I said e's. But knight to e6. Rook d2, threatening to win the pawn. Knight takes c5. b6. Knight moves to e6. Knight takes f2. Notice, of course, that rook takes f2 would be a blunder. If you would like to see. Visually, rook takes e2. Which would lead to h3. It would give up to be equality, is what it looks like. So it's not completely losing, because black can take the bishop, I believe. Okay. Black can take the pawn. No. What, I wonder what, the move is here. I'm not sure. But I wouldn't want to get myself into this situation. So, we'll go back to the game. Knight takes f2. Then we have c5. B takes c5. Knight takes c5. Knight back to g4. Slight inaccuracy, but pretty much everything is starting to win, and white is starting to crumble in this position. Rook to e1. Rook to c2. Knight to e6. Rook c3. Knight d4. Knight takes c3. e3. a4. f4. G takes f. G takes f. h3. Bishop h3. I apologize. Bishop h3. Now with bishop h3, I have a nice, interesting move here. If you're listening and you're doing this blindfolded, you can try to find it. Just blindfolded if you're interested. So without further ado, I will say it is a triple attack with a discovered attack with knight to c2. So the knight is attacking the rook and the knight, and the rook is attacking the bishop. Very interesting move that could have developed is bishop to e5 or e6 check, king to g7, then knight take then rook could go to pin potentially the knight, which would be a blunder, and knight takes knight, rook takes rook, and knight takes bishop, which is apparently a blunder, but I personally think that this would be more than adequate. Actually, more simple, of course, would be the knight check to win the rook back. So, yeah, I totally missed that tactic. Back to the game. Knight to c2. Rook takes c2. Rook d1. e3. Bishop g4. Knight e4. Rook d4. And here, rook to d4 could actually, is a mistake, which actually allows for the move f3, which is best. I played the second best move, which is possibly, of course, uh, just as winning, but uh, f3 threatens checkmate and allows, of course, uh, black to have two connected pass, or allows black's two connected pass pawns to be further advanced and protected, being pushed to the 7th rank a lot easier. But I did not play f3. I played the simple move, rook to c1 check. So rook has to move back to d1, or the bishop moves back. Either way, the game would be nearly lost for white, which it still is. Rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, and we have a5 to solidify the weakness of the backward pawn on b3. Bishop g4, king to f7, just to prevent against any check shenanigans. King f1. And a more accurate move here probably would have been f3 once again, just to solidify any type of weaknesses, or to solidify any type of king counterplay that white has. And unfortunately, I did not play this move, which I, in retrospect, probably would have, just to make the game a little bit easier. So we have bishop to c2, threatening to win the pawn. King to e2. King takes b3, which is a slight inaccuracy. Still winning, but we give away for the king to go to f3, which makes the game a little bit harder because we give up the 2 pawns for the bishop. If you want to see visually, of course, what I'm doing the moves. King takes pawn. It would be king takes pawn would be the best move here. And here, of course, you would have to play pretty accurate because of the potential for getting the bishop, the wrong square color on the wrong square bishop. You would go ahead and pretty much have the bishop go to win this pawn, and then slowly, of course, go to the king side on the toward the h square to win the h pawn, and then promote on that side, as white would have to decide on which pawn, of course, to be able to take. They're too far away and too far gone. All right, so we have we're at bishop e2. I was saying about bishop takes b3. That king f3 probably would have been a good try, but we have bishop to d7, continuing the game. And to make the game easy, we have the simple move bishop to d5. So bishop d5 brings to bishop to b5, king f6, h4, king e5, bishop d3, king to d4 with resigns, as white will not be able to stop these 2 passed pawns. So, without further ado, I'd like to wish you a farewell. Well, I said without further ado, but au revoir is what I meant to say. Au revoir, farewell, my friends. Thank you so much for viewing. This was a game, like I said, that was near and dear to me because I've gotten past 2100. So it was a Reti opening once again, if I did not state that. A Reti Gambit specifically. And I hope you enjoyed. And it was just a simple mop-up game. But thanks so much for viewing. And hopefully, of course, you will continue to play unusual openings as well, as I've tried to promote unusual openings on this YouTube channel for chess, rather than going through like, oh, my night of game went so well, blah 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 blah. No, we had a Reti opening that had a queen a4 or queen to a4 check line. So thanks so much for viewing. Have a wonderful day.